Hello everybody, my name is Yulia Bone and we're going to talk in this video about gross domestic products or about the definition of gross domestic product and what we're going to study in chapter 5. So pretty much after studying this chapter we will learn or we know a lot about gross domestic product. We're going to talk about how to calculate it. We're going to talk about what are different GDPs that we calculate, why economies do that, what exactly are they looking at when they calculate different gross domestic products. We're going to look at components of GDP. We're going to learn how to calculate inflation rate, and we're going to talk about, well, this GDP, is it a kind of measure that does it measure what it's really supposed to measure? So really quick, little reminders from the previous course that you have taken. Remember, if we're talking about microeconomics, this is the study of how households and firms interact. So the decision making on the level of households and firms. And then if we're talking about macroeconomics, once again, this very broad definition, economy-wide phenomena. Okay, what does it really mean? So in this course in macroeconomics, we're going to study different statistics that are going to show us how the economy is doing overall, not just some kind of market for ice cream or market for pizza or market for coffee that we studied in the previous course, but in macroeconomics we're going to look at the unemployment. So unemployment is going to tell us about economy as a whole. Yes, we're going to calculate inflation for the country. So once again, this is going to tell us about how the economy doing, in general. So pretty much kind of this bigger macroeconomic statistics. So guys, if you were to judge how well a certain family doing in the economy, then you would probably look at that family kind of lifestyle. You will look how well or where that family lives, what kind of house they live in, what kind of cars do they drive, and what kind of vacations do they take. And by looking at family lifestyle, you can actually determine, or you can say, well, you know what, this family actually, doing really well. They making, plenty of money. If we were to judge how well the nation is doing, not the family, but nation, then we would look at gross domestic product, because gross domestic product, it's actually measured total income of everybody in the economy, total income of everybody in a certain country. Okay, so therefore, if you add up all those incomes together, you can tell how well the nation is doing. Okay, so when we look at the gross domestic product, once again, it measures total income of the economy, or it measures total expenditure in the economy. So you can look either at total income or total expenditure, and in reality, these kind of numbers, they have to be the same. Why it is so? Because each transaction of somebody's income in the economy equals to the same transaction of somebody's expenditure in the economy. Okay, how does it work? I'm going to give you the example. Let's suppose me, Miss Bowen, let's suppose I'm going to hire somebody to mow my yard. And let's suppose they're going to come and mow my yard, and let's suppose it's going to be $60. They're going to say, here you go. Okay, for this service, you need to pay $60. Remember, if I am Miss Bowen, and I am paying this $60 to the XYZ company, for me this $60 is going to be expenditure, isn't it? For me, this $60 is going to be expenditure. But the same $60 for the company that actually mowing my lawn is going to be income. Okay, the same amount for the company that providing a service for me, it's actually going to be income. So therefore, for each transaction of expenditure in the economy, there is an equal transaction of income to the other person, to the other company in our economy. Therefore, okay, in order to kind of look at our gross domestic product, we can use income approach or we can use expenditure approach. So here you go, gross domestic product. Guys, what are we going to do? We're going to learn this definition. And in this definition, every single word means something, okay? And we're going to explain every single word, what does it really mean. So gross domestic product, okay, this definition you need to know for the test. This is the market value of all final goods and services produced within the economy in a given period of time. Okay, so and you see how the market value is actually highlighted here. So we're going to discuss what does it mean, this gross domestic product. Okay, what does it mean, market value? So market value, it means that when we calculate gross domestic product, we're going to include those goods and services that have market value. What does it mean, market value? Just think about it. If you're going to go to the grocery store and let's suppose you're buying a pound of apples, you paying $3 to the cashier for this pound of apples. It means that pound of apples has a market value of $3. Here you go. You're giving cashier $3. She's giving you the apple. Okay, so therefore, when this transaction happen in the economy, that's going to contribute to GDP. Now, let's suppose Yulia Bowen actually grown apples at the back of her yard. And let's suppose here you go, October, the apples are actually, ready. And I'm actually getting 1 pound of apples from the back of my yard and I consume that. When I consume those apples, I created some kind of value for my family, isn't it? But because those apples were growing in somebody's yard, there is no market value for that. I didn't go to the store and I didn't purchase that pound of apples. You see what I'm saying? So once again, I created some kind of value for me, but because there is no market value for it, I just grew it and I consume it, my family consume it. So therefore, okay, that a kind of action or transaction is not going to be the part of the GDP. Let's suppose I actually took these apples and I'm going to treat my neighbor. I'm going to go to my neighbor and I'm going to say, here you go. Here's some apples that I grew in my yard. That's for you. So I created some kind of value for my neighbor. They consume apples, but that transaction is not going to have a market value. Okay, so pretty much, okay, if you're doing something on your own, let's suppose you're cleaning your house, you produce some kind of value for your family. Right now, your house is clean because you did it on your own. That's not going to be a part of the GDP. If you hire a company to clean your house, let's suppose company XYZ come into your house and they're cleaning your house and you need to pay actually them $80. Because they charge you $80, let's suppose once again there was a little legal transaction, okay, so everything is on the books, then this transaction is going to contribute to GDP. GDP is going to increase by $80. Okay, so once again, I want you to kind of to have the idea. So gross domestic product, okay, this is the measure that is going to tell us how well the nation is doing. Okay, so there are a lot of transactions that are actually happening in our economy. Okay, and we need to figure out what exactly is going to be calculated towards GDP, because remember, we talk about that gross domestic product. This is total income of everybody in the economy, or this is total expenditure of everybody in the economy. When we kind of try to take into consideration, the value of the GDP, we need to understand what are we taking into consideration. So transactions that are going to have market value in the economy are going to be the part of the GDP. So next one, all. What does it mean, all? When we calculate gross domestic product, we're going to include all goods and services that happened legally in our country. Sales of illegally produced goods and services are not going to be the part of the GDP. For example, sales of illegal drugs. Believe it or not, in the economy, it's a huge kind of market. Okay, it has a huge value, but we don't calculate this as the part of the GDP. So therefore, all transactions that happen only legally on the market. In other countries, in some of the countries, for example, England, I believe it's France, I also believe it is Spain, illegal transactions are actually included in the part of the GDP. And some of these countries actually make these changes, not long ago. For example, England, they included, believe it or not, prostitution as the part of the GDP. Once again, it's a legal, business, But government decided, well, you know what, that value is actually created in the economy, and they decided to include this as the part of their GDP. In the United States, we don't have it. So therefore, remember, all, what does it mean all? We're going to include all goods and services that produce legally in the. So let's suppose we're going to have a baker. We're going to have a baker. So in order to make a pie, baker is going to purchase sugar, flour, let's suppose apples. He's making an apple pie. So when baker purchasing this sugar and these apples, transaction happen in our economy. Is this transaction going to be the part of the GDP? And the answer is no. Okay, not the part of the GDP, because once again, this is going to be our intermediate product. We use this in order to produce this final good pie. Remember, we use the value of apples and value of sugar and put it in the final value of our pie. If we calculate sugar, purchasing of sugar and purchasing of apples by this baker as the part of the GDP, our GDP would be overstated. Our GDP would be humongous. But because it's intermediate goods, so that's not the part of the GDP. If Ms. Bowen, okay, is purchasing the sugar just to have, I don't know, to drink tea or something, or apples, just to consume apples for my family, when I go to the grocery store and I'm purchasing that, that's going to be the part of the GDP. I spend the money. Let's suppose I spend $10 on these two products. I'm an end user of this, so therefore that's going to be the part of the GDP. So don't forget, final products, okay, are the part of the GDP. Intermediate products are not the part of the GDP. So next one is going to be goods and services. So guys, this is relatively easy. Either we produce goods in our economy or services. That's going to be the part of the GDP. Goods, we're talking about something tangible. You know, we are buying computers, we're buying cell phones, we are buying our books and stuff like that. So that's going to be the part of the GDP. And then if we're talking about services, remember that your education is a service. When you pay for your education, that's going to be the part of the GDP. If you go to do a haircut, that's going to be the part of the GDP. If you're paying for your cell phone service or internet service, you know, you go into a lawyer or you hire a designer to design an office for you or something like that, that's all going to be the part of the GDP. Next one, we're going to talk about produce, okay? So when we calculate GDP, we're going to take into consideration currently produced goods. What does it really mean? Goods that are produced in the past, it's not going to be the part of the GDP. For example, if we calculate GDP for year 2019, we're going to take all transactions or all goods and services that were produced that year. Okay, so now I'm going to give you the example. Let's suppose Miss Bowen purchased a car in year 2016. It was a new car. Okay, I drove it, for example, for whatever this 3 years, and I don't know. Let's suppose I spent $20,000 on the car in 2016, and then year 2019 comes, and I'm saying, you know what? I want to sell my car. I'm going to sell this car, and let's suppose it lost a little bit of value, and I'm actually selling this car in year 2019 for $12,000. The question is, when I sold my car in year 2019 for $12,000, is this going to contribute, this amount is going to contribute to GDP of year 2019? And the answer is no, because we need to calculate only currently produced goods. Remember, when I purchased this car in year 2016 and I paid $20,000, remember that car was new, okay? Then $20,000 contribute to 2016 year GDP. When I resell this car, or when I resold or sold this car in year 2020 for 2019 for $12,000, this transaction is not going to be the part of the GDP. Okay, so what kind of other example I'm going to give you? Very complicated. Okay, very complicated. Let's suppose Toyota Corporation produced a car, and they produced a car December the 30th, 2019. Okay, so we produced that car in year 2019. Do you think it's going to be easy for Toyota Corporation to sell this car in year 2019? And the answer is no. Okay, so let's suppose January the 14th comes, okay, and Toyota Corporation actually of 2020, and Toyota Corporation selling this car. Okay, they sell that car to an end buyer, and let's suppose, I don't know, that car was worth $20,000, and they sold that car in year 2020 for $20,000. When this transaction happened, is that going to be the part of the GDP of year 2020? And the answer is no, because remember, that car was produced in year 2019. We have to calculate it as the value of production in year 2019. So what is Toyota Corporation going to do? They're going to put this car as the part of the inventory for year 2019. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second as well. I expand on that a little bit more. So, and therefore, if that car was worth $20,000, okay, they put as a part of the inventory because they didn't sell it in year 2019, and that will contribute to year 2019 GDP. Okay, so when once again we took it out of our inventory and sold it in year 2020, that transaction is not going to be the part of the GDP. So guys, anything that we are selling old, okay, for example, furniture, I don't know, old houses and stuff like that, that's not the part of the GDP. Newly constructed house that was produced, for example, in year 2020 and sold in year 2020, it's going to be the part of the GDP. Whatever that appreciation of the house, if the value is actually increasing and we're reselling the house that is 20 years old, that's not the part of the GDP. So keep going. Next one is going to be within the country. So remember, when we calculate gross domestic product for the United States, we're going to take into consideration production within the borders of the United States. It doesn't matter if that product was produced by citizens or by foreigners. Remember, once again, don't forget, we're all the time talking about that this production or this transaction or sale of the good, it have to have a market value. Okay, we are talking about the goods that produce legally. It have to be a final good. It have to be good or service. It have to actually be produced within that certain year. Okay, and it have to be produced within the country. Once again, doesn't matter by citizen or by foreigners, but that's going to be the part of the, for example, USA GDP. Okay, I'm going to give you the example. Let's suppose Miss Bowen. Okay, Miss Bowen, I am believe it or not, with my accent and stuff, I am a US citizen. And Miss Bowen, it's actually, she's actually going to go to France, and I open up a little restaurant over here, or over there in France, okay, and in year 2019, I produce, I don't know, $50,000 or whatever, let's suppose euros, we translate it into dollars, $50,000 worth of meals working in France. I'm a US citizen. Okay, when I produce this $50,000 worth of meal in France, is this the part of the US GDP? And the answer is no, because once again, I'm an American citizen. I produce something outside of the country, that's not the part of the GDP. If Miss Bowen, let's suppose I'm a French citizen and I come to the United States, so I'm going to be a French citizen, and I come to the United States and I open up a restaurant and I produce $50,000 worth of meals. My question is, in this situation, when a French citizen produced $50,000 worth of meals on the territory of the United States, is it a part of the US GDP? And the answer is yes. Okay, for French citizen is yes. Is this going to be the part of French GDP? And the answer is no, because remember, everything what is considered to be GDP of the United States, it have to be produced in the United States. Everything that is considered to be French GDP, it have to be produced in that country. Okay, guys, there is GNP, gross national product, and this is where citizens of a certain country produce within the country or outside of the country. That's going to be gross national product. I'm a citizen of the United States, okay, and let's suppose I produce some meals in Germany. Okay, I open up a company in Germany. Is this going to be the part of US GNP? Yes, it will be. Is it going to be the part of US GDP? No, it's not. So keep going. Next one, a couple of more, okay, or one more. The last one, it's actually in a given period of time. So once again, given period of time, this is easy. We usually calculate GDP within a year. Okay, year, for example, GDP for year 2019, or we also do by quarters. You know, they calculate GDP, you know, every 3 months, and this is what they report for a certain year. For example, first quarter of year 2019, second quarter of year 2019. So this is within a certain period of time. So guys, once again, remember, every transaction that is happening in the economy, is it contribute to GDP? No. We need to know what is contribute to GDP. Transactions have to have market value. It have to be legal transaction. It have to be final good. Okay, remember, either tangible goods or services. It is the part of the GDP. Remember, they have to be produced currently. If we calculate GDP for year 2019, only those goods that produce within that year going to be the part of the 2019 GDP. Sales of used goods, all goods, is not the part of the GDP of that year when we resell the product. Okay, it have to be within the country. Once again, doesn't matter if it is by citizen or by you know, a foreigner. Once again, it have to be legal, you know, production, and then in a given period of time, you know, we usually say in a year, or we're doing it by quarters. All right, guys, I hope everybody understand now what is GDP, and I know you can crush this course. I hope you're going to have a great semester. So we're going to move to the next video.